So my name is Marco Black. I'm the line producer and the UPM, Unit Production Manager for the Rookie. And we put together today, this is going to be very much a whirlwind of just some of the many positions that are available in film and television. So here you can see from today's agenda, there's myself, and then we'll have Bill Rinier, who's representing the writers, Bill Rowe, who's representing directors, but he also kind of represents camera as well. He's had a long career on both camera and as directing. Then we have Zhao, who's our production designer, followed by Helen, who's our post-production producer, Vidal, who's our key grip, Sean, who's our gaffer, Julia, who's our costume designer, and Mike, who's our property master. I'll be speaking today just to give you a brief overview of filmmaking. I'll speak a little bit about line producing and being an assistant director. I came up through the ranks as an assistant director. I'll probably stop myself short just to give other people some time, but definitely stay tuned to at the end at 5:45. If you got to do other stuff, leave, you can come back, whatever. But I'll have some more comments and stuff on the end. So I always start off with like filmmaking as a profession. And today you're going to hear a lot of us talk about what we do, but we're also going to talk about how we got here. What were the different paths? Because it's not one linear path in how you get into this business. There's multiple ways to get into this business. And there are, I mean, countless different jobs and everything to get into it. I always start by saying like storytelling, like why did I choose this profession? Why did I think a lot of people choose this profession? They love simply that simple act of telling a story. And that is at the base what we do for our livings. We're part of an assembly line, if you will, like a factory. The difference is we are an assembly line that sets up in a new place every single day. Every single day, we're in an entirely new area, or we're doing something entirely new, but it's still an assembly line. You have the product that's being put on the assembly line, and then you have multiple other assembly lines that are feeding various components into that assembly line. When you're down on the filming set, you know, everyone at this point, I think, is very kind of familiar with like filmmaking process. But you typically, if you analyze a lot of films, a lot of television shows, at some point they have a wider shot that shows you the geography, explains what's happening. And then you go into what we call coverage. So like, you know, individual close-ups. Right now I'm in like a medium close-up. It's a term that we would use probably in terms of framing. Each time we set up one of these shots, first we do is called a block it, where we say none of the cameras are rolling. We haven't even lit it yet, but we're going to figure out where everyone is. Then we're going to figure out where we put the cameras. And we start lighting it. Once it's kind of lit and the camera's in place, we bring everyone back in, we rehearse it, then we shoot it, and then we start with the next shot after that. It is literally that simple and yet extremely complex, especially when you get into VFX, where just to do one shot, to have one shot, you might actually have to have 3 different elements shot on 3 totally separate days that will all converge in the post. Filmmaking, which also involves television, it's a highly collaborative effort. It's going to take multiple people, multiple departments, all basically working together as a team. And later on, once we get into the wrapping up phase, I'll talk a little bit about union and non-union work. Today, you're going to be hearing from everyone is some member of the union. I'm a member of the Directors Guild of America. When we introduce everyone, you'll see what union they belong to. You don't have to necessarily belong to a union. There's plenty of non-union work. In fact, I'll advise people, sometimes that's the best way to get into filmmaking is actually through the non-union route. So I'll start touching upon, you know, what a line producer does, and the production department, assistant directors in general. I put together this thing, and I think one second, let me get out of the screen view for a second. I've cut off some departments here with what you can see. But basically what I've done is just outline, you know, it's not as much of a hierarchy as I laid it out here, but it is like at the top is, if you can see here my cursor, the network. The network is CBS or ABC or NBC or Netflix. They're the true entity and the distributor of what that product is that you're making, or television show or film. The studio then is right underneath the network. It can be the same. So you can have ABC Studios that's producing for ABC Network. This is all just complex stuff. Underneath the studio, then you have, essentially you have the showrunner. The showrunner, they are truly like the head producer. They are usually the ones that came up with the idea. They are the master writer of the show. Underneath the showrunner, you have then all the various writers. In some of these departments, I've listed out other positions that come under. There's a script coordinator that helps the writers assemble everything. And then not so much underneath the showrunner, though technically you've got like then the line producer, the director, and the post producer. So the post producer is focused solely on getting everything ready, taking everything that's been filmed and putting it through the post-production assembly line so that it's ready for the final airing. The director, I think everyone knows what that person does. They're the ones who really like the master storyteller. So they're the ones that are going to take that script, kind of break it down and organize it into the various shots that they want to do. The person who's going to be instrumental to that director in doing that is the first assistant director. The line producer is someone, what we do is we're really tasked, we're kind of like the chief problem solver of the show. We're really tasked with keeping the show on budget and on schedule. I'll get more of these duties. And you guys can take a screenshot of this if you want. You can just show the various departments I have here, which is more like the assistant directors. I ran out of room, so underneath here, a POC is production office coordinator, a POC, assistant production office coordinator. But as you can see, it's just like there is a wide branch of people, and a lot of them fall under, they report to certain people. First AD, location manager, transportation coordinator, stunt coordinator, they're going to report probably more directly first to UPM and to me, the line producer, than to the director of photography. But a gaffer, a key grip, a camera operator, they're reporting directly to the director of photography. Same over here on production designer. You have, technically underneath the designer, you actually have a lot of different departments. We wouldn't think of it, but they actually kind of are following in line to the production designer. Costumes, hair and makeup, props, a set decorator, construction coordinator. They all report directly to under the production designer. And so all of these are these are most of the positions on the actual film set. Let's see if I can make this a little cleaner. All right, I'll just keep it in this view here. So as I was talking a little bit about a line producer and a UPM, unit production manager, they're the person that they oversee all aspects of the operation, from pre-production, the production phase when we're actually filming, and even into the post-production period. A line producer UPM is definitely not an entry-level position. You get to this from a lot of years of experience. I'm basically hitting 30 years now in the business. I probably started being a UPM about 15 years ago, but it takes some time basically to get the experience to work up to being this way. The route to get to being a line producer, 90% of the time it's being a unit production manager, but you can also become a line producer by being a first AD, a location manager. There's even been transportation coordinators and production supervisors. And you'll find this is kind of true of a lot of our positions. There's not a clean route, or I should say there's not just simply one route getting there. So that can be a good and it can be a bad thing. It can be confusing. You can actually, you can get lost sometimes in what your original route was. But at the same time, it also opens you up to, basically it translates into, there's a lot of opportunities. A unit production manager is very similar to a line producer. It's just line producer carries more oversight. We tend to delegate more stuff to a unit production manager underneath us, or a production supervisor. We'll use to basically help with a lot of the minutiae of the logistics of the show, all the equipment, personnel that's needed for it, not just the next day, but for that week or the following week. If we need to make special deals, things like that with animal trainers or helicopters that we brought in before on the show. Depending on the size of the operation, you might have multiple UPMs or production supervisors. Lastly, UPMs and line producers were tasked with the overall safety of the entire operation, which can be challenging because we do a lot of challenging things. Here's a photograph just from last week where we had a helicopter and flying close. Every time we do a shot or anything involving a helicopter, the first assistant director basically calls a safety meeting of everyone involved. So here, again, you can take a screenshot. I won't go through all the minutiae of it, but essentially the assistant directors are the key organizers of the filming period. The primary job is basically, it's communication. The first AD is the person who's focused on the set operations. So they work closely with the director. The director explains what they want to do in a scene. The first AD helps kind of translate it into the shots and then figures out what's the best order of the shot. They're going to do that in conjunction with, though, also the director of photography and the production designer, because there's elements that, again, it's a teamwork type thing. So we have to find out, well, what's good for the photography side of things? What's good for the production design? If you have a set, is it sometimes better to start with all the walls in, or do you start with some of the walls out? The first AD develops the overall schedule just on the daily basis, but also on the weekly, as well as for what the shooting period is. In television, we have 7 days to prep an episode. So 7 days, for instance, tomorrow we get a script, we get our next script. We have 7 days, and that's it, to get all the locations found, to get everything set up before we start filming it. Typically, our episodes take about 9 days of filming. So underneath the first AD is the key second AD. And that key second focuses more on cast, but they also communicate to all the department heads, entire crew, a lot of the logistics. They're the ones that produce what we call a call sheet, which is basically just a document that comes out each day, shows what everyone's time is that they have to report that day, shows what special equipment is needed, shows what the order, the scenes that we're filming. And then underneath the key second, we have second seconds. They assist on the set with the first AD, helping with the logistics. They assist in base camp, getting all the actors ready. And I think down here, and I'm gonna have to cut myself off short. If people have questions about getting to become an assistant director or a UPM, wait till the end in the wrap-up section, and I'll talk about my career path. Just so you know, for me, I grew up in this business. My father started off as an assistant director in the late 50s, early 60s. He became a director and a writer for many years. I grew up thinking that I wanted to be a director. So my career path, I initially started off as an assistant director, primarily as a first assistant director. That had me so involved on the set. But over the years, I realized that my skill set was, aside from directing, was also on the organization side of things. And that kind of led me into being a UPM and a line producer. At the bottom of this page here that you can see it, I've noted how the way to become an assistant director, the way into it is, a lot of times, and I'll touch upon this in another section, but I advise people like Facebook. I know everyone's grandparents are on it, but there are some groups actually, and you can just do a search on there where they're putting job postings on Facebook. And they're looking for non-union people. So You're starting right out the bat. If you want to become an assistant director, you got to start off as a set production assistant. What does the PA do? Anything and everything under the sun, basically. A lot of times it's just simply using a walkie-talkie and helping what we call lockup, meaning making sure no people walk into the shot that aren't supposed to be in that shot. But they're basically a gopher on set, doing anything and everything. So you can get to that AD position by acquiring a certain number of days as a production assistant, or a certain number of days as a non-union assistant director, or joining the DGA training program. I'll go into this more at the end of the thing. So at this time, let me introduce our next guest, Bill Rinier. He's a co-producer and writer on the show. He's also a member of the Writers Guild of America, and he'll talk a little bit about what a writer does and how he got there. So Bill, I'll stop my screen share and you can take over on yours.
Terrific. Hey everybody, I am Bill Rinier. I am one of the writer producers on The Rookie. As far as television, the writing department is where everything starts. That's where we come up with the scripts, and without a script, no one else on this Zoom could basically do their job. There's nothing to direct, nothing to produce, nothing to post-produce, and nothing to air. So every show starts with a writing staff, and that can be a different number of people. Every show is a little bit different. And the writing staff is usually a mix of different experience levels. I'm sure watching television, you've seen credits like staff writer or exec story editor or producer. Those are basically titles that correspond to how much experience you have, basically. You start at the bottom, which is a staff writer, and then you work your way all the way up to executive producer, and that is the top of the ladder. In the writing department, we also rely on a support staff, which is very important, and that's basically three different positions. The first one is a writer's assistant, and their main job usually is to be in the writer's room with us, and they sit there and take notes of everything that we say. Once in a while, we'll say something brilliant and we might forget about it. So they got to get it in the record so that we can go back and look at it. There's also a writer's PA, a writer's production assistant, and that person works at the offices. They make copies of the scripts that come out, schedules, calendars. They also help distribute all that stuff. They keep the office stocked with pencils and pens and all that stuff. And they also do get us lunch when it's necessary and go on coffee runs and stuff like that. And then the third position in the writing department, it's a script coordinator, which Marco briefly mentioned. And I'm going to talk more about that later because that's actually how I got started as a writer. That was my first job. And then I kind of worked my way up to get promoted to being a writer. Now, the head writer is the showrunner, which Marco also touched on. So they're not just in charge of the writing, they're in charge of the entire show and every aspect of it. The writing, the production, post-production, all of that, like Marco said. And because of that, the showrunner is not in the writer's room all day, every day, like the writers are. The showrunner will come in and we will present our ideas, which is also known as pitching. We'll go and pitch them, him or her, our story ideas, episodes, and they'll give us direction as to, yeah, that's great. No, I don't want to do that. And so that helps us get to through the process. Now, when I say all day, every day that we're in the room, that's not quite right. Every show's different, but our writer's room generally operates between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. And we try to take at least an hour for lunch and, 10-minute breaks here and there for a restroom, etc. Now, even though the room is done at 4 o'clock, we have homework pretty much every day. If a script has come out, we should be reading those scripts, outlines. We should also be researching and coming up with new ideas every day so that you're ready to pitch an idea the next day. And then finally, of course, there's at some point you're going to be off writing. And when it comes to writing, there is no schedule. There's no 10 to 6. It's just like being in school. If you've got a paper to do, you have a deadline and you got to meet the deadline. So if you're writing till 7 p.m., midnight, and believe it or not, there are times when you need to pull an all-nighter. That is not unheard of in the writing world. Before I go on, I should mention, as far as where we are, how this all works, the writer's room. In the old days, pre-COVID, the writers would have offices at the studio, which for the Rookie is Warner Brothers. And then our writer's room would be a giant conference room. There's a big table and we'd all meet there in person. And around the room, there would be what we call boards. And writers depend very much on these boards. There are cork boards or they can be dry erase boards, but it's basically, we use them to break the season and to break the episodes, which basically means come up with them. Then of course, COVID happened and everything went to Zoom. So the writers were working at home and we were on a Zoom like this, and our boards became virtual, which I will show you an example of in a moment. And that was last season. This season, we've kind of got a mix where our showrunner and a few of our upper level writers are working in the offices and the rest of us are still working at home. We come together on Zoom every day, and that's basically how we work. Now, as far as how we come up with the season and episodes and everything, this is when I'm going to start sharing my screen. Try this. Okay. So the staff's been hired. We come in for the first day of a new season, and this is what we come into. This is our season board, and it's blank. At the top, we have a heading for each episode of the season. Just for simplicity's sake, let's say next season, season 5, we only have 8 episodes. We're going to have more than that. And then down the side of the board, we list our characters. And each character gets a different color card so that you can track them very easily visually once we get to the episodes. But let's just say, as an example, this is just a simple explanation. Oh, one of our ideas is we want Nolan to be a detective by the end of next season. Nolan is played by Nathan. He's our lead, Nathan Fillion. So we usually start with him, the most important. So let's say we want him to be a detective. So then we would start to brainstorm. We'd start to pitch ideas. Let's say in the first episode, oh, Nolan decides to be a detective. Well, what else could we do this season? Well, maybe there's an episode, these cards are tricky, where he spends the day with a detective just to make sure that that's what he wants to do. Well, let's put that there. Then maybe there's an episode where he's studying for the detective test. Another episode where he takes the test but fails. Dun, dun, dun. And then in our finale, let's say that he breaks this really cold case, saves the day, they let him retake the test, and bam, he's going to be a detective next season. So that's basically the general movements, the arc for the character. And we go ahead and we do that with each of our characters. And that board gets filled up. And that way we have a general sense of, oh, okay, here's where our season's going to go. And these are the general movements of what's going to happen. So once we're done that, it's time to move to the actual episodes. And when we do that, we start with an episode board. Now you can see at the top here, this is broken down into acts because each script and each show that you watch is, you may not realize it, broken down into segments. And between those segments are the commercial breaks. So that's basically what the end of an act is. That's when the commercials come. So we are in episode 501. We refer back to our seasonal board. What did we want to do in 501? Oh yeah, Nolan's going to decide he wants to be a detective. All right, well, how's that going to happen? So then we go over and we break it down into, we blue sky or brainstorm what these stories are going to be. And I have made some cards down here. Basically, it's coming up with a beginning, a middle, and an end to the story. So let's say Nolan responds to a call where he's almost killed. Oh no, a brush with death. And then there's a scene where he just can't stop thinking about it. Maybe later in the episode, he decides, I'm going to quit. I can't take this anymore. And then for maybe a final beat, he decides, no, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to become a detective, which gets me off the streets and it's a safer job. By the way, no spoiler alerts. This is all made up. I'm just doing this for an example. He's not going to be a detective next year. Marco, don't pay attention to this. So once you've broken all the stories, you do the same for all of the characters, which leaves you with a bunch of these we call cards. Then you kind of meld them together, blend them into the episode board. So Nolan getting into a life or death thing, oh, that feels like an act 1 thing. Maybe by act 3, oh my gosh, he can't get this out of his head. Act 4, he decides to quit, but then we always have our happy ending in act 6. And, you know, at the end of the episode down here, he decides. So you would go through and do that with all the stories. And at the end, this is for an episode that's already aired. You basically have a board that looks like this. And this is called, the episode is now broken. And this is when the showrunner would come in, take a look, and you walk them through, oh yeah, that works. Okay, you're off the board, which means it's time to go write. Now, we break these episodes as a group all together in the room. But as far as the script and the other documents, there's one writer or a writing team who is assigned to take it from once you've come off the board. So the first document I'm going to walk you through, the first document after you have broken an episode is called a story doc. And this is the format of it. This is from one of my episodes. And this goes to the studio and the network being the buyer and the studio being the person who's making this. And they give us notes on it and a direction and what they like and what they don't like. Then we move on to the next document, which is an outline. Now, not every show does an outline. We don't generally do them, but I just wanted to show you what it looks like. And this is basically scene by scene, what is going to happen in the episode. That goes to studio network. You get more notes, and then you're greenlit to go to script. And you do the first version of the script, which this is LA. I'm sure some of you have seen the format of how these things are. And then finally, this goes to the studio and the network. You get more notes. And once it's blessed, you go on to the final version of the script, which is called a production draft. And that's what gets handed over. Okay, production. It goes to the director, it goes to the crew, it goes to the actors, and that is what you're going to be making. And that is the process in a nutshell. I don't know how much time I have left, but
no, we've got a few minutes, so definitely. You know, at this time, does anyone have any questions for Bill?
Oh, I think I need to do how I got into it, don't I?
Well, I bet you that's probably going to come up. Let's see if someone's got a question first. So if you got a question, use that raise hand function. And while if anyone's formulating, if you got a question or not, go ahead, Bill. Why don't you tell us how you got into?
Yeah, long story short, I'm from back the East Coast, a little suburb outside of Philadelphia. I just always knew growing up I wanted to be part of the entertainment industry. At one point, I thought maybe acting, writing, directing, whatever. So I ended up going to film school in New York, and I moved out here after college. I had no connections, no friends, no nothing. So it took a while for me to kind of get that first job. I did a lot of odd jobs. I did temping, and everything in this business, a lot of your first jobs are going to come from people you know. And so someone that I had temped with went on to work on a show. They were working for the showrunner and were able to help me get a writer's assistant job. It was for a show that you've never heard of, but at that job, I learned how to script coordinate with the position that we talked about earlier. And that position, you're working with the writers. Basically, a script coordinator gets the script. They break it down, give it scene numbers, they proof it, they make sure it's in the right format. They break down a cast list, they break down a set list, and then they distribute it to everyone, the cast, the crew, the network, the studio. That's basically the job. So you get to learn both ends, working with writers and also working with production. From there, I went to work on a couple shows. I got my first freelance episode. Hooray, my career's been made. No, your career's not made. It took many years after that for me to get my first job, which was great. It lasted a few years. And then after that, oh, it's hooray, my job's made. No, I didn't work for a couple of years after that. Long story short, I decided to go back to script coordinating, which led me to The Rookie. I started season 1 as the script coordinator for the show. Alexi Hawley, our showrunner, is a really great guy, loves to reward hardworking people and give them opportunities. And he knew that I had been a writer, so he gave me a co-freelance that script that first season, which fortunately I didn't screw up. So the next year he put me on the writing staff, and I've been here ever since. And end of Bill's story. Go,
So
Marco.
Bill, we have a question. Someone, I think it's Kaya Moore is asking, do you ever worry or think about if a plot is too cliche or not? It's a good question.
All the time, yes. But the good news is we have a room full of brilliant people. So we bounce ideas off each other and we ask them, oh, is it too cliche? And maybe a senior writer will say, yeah, let's not even bring that up to the showrunner. Or maybe a couple people will say, no, that's a really great idea. That's great. Let's tell the showrunner. And then the showrunner is the one who says, oh, yeah, no, that's too cliche. But you try not to censor yourself, because the creative process is about just free-flowing ideas. There's nothing wrong in pitching, basically. I can't think of the words as a writer, but yeah. So yes, to answer your question.
And then here another question, and we'll get to our next speaker, Bill Rowe. This is a question from Ava Russell, which is, what do you do when you're stuck and you don't know what to do with the plot? Or does that tend not to happen?
It happens a lot, more than you would think. But again, at that part of the process, we are working on the story as a room. So it's a group of people that are putting all of their brain cells, staring at that episode board and saying, okay, what's not working? And a lot of times we have the showrunner will come in and we think we're done an episode and we'll walk them through it, but the plot's not working for them. There isn't a twist that's good enough, or I feel like I've seen this before, let's do better. And so then the writers take a look and, okay, what does he mean, let's do better? What part's not working? And then we try to problem solve at that point.
And then here, last question, we'll get to Bill. And it's only because this is going to come up a few times, and it's something I'll address at the very end when we get to closing remarks. But you mentioned you went to film school.
Yes.
So looking back now in your career, was that a good thing to go to film school? Would you still have done it? Would you not have gone to film school? Because that is actually something a lot of people in high school are facing the decision.
Interesting question. Full disclosure, I come from, I was raised by my mom, single parent, very poor. I was the first person in my family to go to college. So that's the first part of it. When I realized what I wanted to do and I thought, oh, I should probably go to film school, I knew it was going to be expensive. So my last 2 years of I used to be not the best student. My last 2 years of high school, I decided to really buckle down and get good grades because I knew I would need help. I would need a scholarship. I would need a loan. Long story short, I'm glad I went to film school, but I don't know if it's particularly necessary. In hindsight, I probably should have gone to film school in Los Angeles, USC or UCLA or something, just because a lot of our jobs are relationship-based and connections, and you hear about things through friends. And those connections are easier when you're here in LA, basically, to come up with a support system and a group of friends.
Yeah, well said. All right, well, at this time, if you have time, Bill, come back and join us around 5:00.
Oh, I'm excited. Bill Rowe's going to talk. Oh, this is going to be great. I'm sticking around, Marco.
Oh, great. Thanks.
So introducing here is Bill Rowe, who spent the first part of his career in the camera department, working his way up from an assistant cameraman to camera operator to director of photography. And then Bill, probably 10, 15 years ago, segued into directing. And Bill's the executive producer director of The Rookie. So turning it over to Bill.
Thanks. That was all I had to say anyway. So I'm the executive producer director on The Rookie. And like you said, I'm a DGA member. And also I started in the camera department for 36 years and worked my way up, all the way up. Like, one of the things in this industry, there is a stepping ladder or system that you can go through and you work your way up. Some people only stop at assistant. Some people get to operator. Some people get to, cinematographer. It just depends what you want to do and the opportunities that you have. And you just have to explore all that stuff. And then one day, 12 years ago, somebody asked me if I want to direct, and I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And it worked out so fine so far. So, what else am I going to say? My background is I grew up in the business. My dad was a producer, first AD, did a lot of big movies. I was like, probably my famous thing, I was 14 years old and I worked on Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. That was a lot of fun in Munich. I got started in the camera when I was really young. I got in about 20, 21 years old when I was, and one of the Marco things you asked about going to school or not going to school, you know, so I worked here, we're on the Warner Brothers lot right now. And I actually would sneak on the lot when I was like 19, 20 years old and go to work on the Warner Brothers camera department. And I'd come in, I'd go to school in the mornings, and then I come over here at nights and work here for about a year. And then after that, I was going to do a movie called Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. And I decided so I got in the union on that show, on that feature. And I think I'm known for two things. Work-wise, I did a movie called Space Jam. And I also did a series called The X-Files. And I shot a couple of those movies too. So it's been a great ride. I can't complain. My job as executive producer director, besides directing episodes of The Rookie, I also I help select directors who are going to come in and do one of our episodes. I try to help them when we do pick directors. Especially people that are coming in for the first time, we kind of figure out what we're going to do and how it and the scripts, and help with the director feel how our show is run, how we shoot it, most shows are kind of run the same way, but some shows, everything's a little bit different when it comes to camera and locations and things like that, and how we do things. We have a lot going on in The Rookie. We do a lot of, besides just our regular cameras, we do a lot of drones. We do a thing called body cams that all the police wear. We do a lot of shooting with those. We do a lot of shooting with shop cams, which are actually GoPros that are on the police vehicles all the time. So, and actually we just aired an episode last night that was completely done with, or most of it done with GoPros and body cams. It's actually really interesting. We've done a couple of them now. And then, I don't know, I think that's it. So if anybody's got any questions, please feel free to chime in.
Yeah, you can text in your question if you're more comfortable with that to the chat box, or you can raise your hand and ask it verbally, or turn on your camera, whatever you're comfortable with. You know, while we're waiting, if anyone's got a question, Bill, you know, I didn't, I'm not going to switch to the screen share. Actually, you know, here, it looks like we got a question here. This is from Jonathan. He's asking, what steps would you recommend to take if you're pursuing a career involving the camera in a film? You're the perfect person to ask.
Well, it's funny. I tell a story when I first was working here for free, trying to get in the camera union. One of the guys in the department actually graduated from USC camera, which is a very prestigious place. And he said to me, there's no reason to go to USC if you can get in the union, because it's a totally different way of doing things. I think in school, it's really informative, and it really, you know, makes you want to do your own films, and I get that. That's great. The way I did it was I grew up through the ranks and learned from other people how to do things, and it's from all the way from when I was 21, learning from a very prestigious cameraman about just watching, and you learn, and over the years you figure it out, and it's pretty interesting.
Another question from Paul is, you know, so here's a question: what is your favorite filming style on the camera? But I guess that might mean, like, you know, handheld or Steadicam.
Handheld, or I'm partial to very long lenses, long lenses. So basically I love to do a scene like really wide, and then you pop in with really long lenses, you know, 180, 200 millimeters. I think it's just a great dynamic. It looks wonderful on the screen.
So
and
what,
anamorphic, by the way.
So when you go onto a long lens, what does that mean, Bill? What is the effect that long lens?
Well, I mean, the scale of lenses will say from 21 to 200, and 200 being really super tight. And if you can stay back really long on the 200s and you film a wider shot that way, it just brings in a lot of depth of field, and I like it a lot. Perfect example is my favorite people are Tony Scott and Ridley Scott. They just know how to do the camera. It's just beautiful.
Is there a film that you would say, like, as a cinematographer, what's like a couple of your films that you would recommend to students, like, hey, watch this if you want to see really good photography?
I don't know.
As well as
Man on
direction.
Fire is my favorite movie. I love that movie. I just think it's photographically wise and all the hand cranked. I have my own hand crank camera. It's interesting. You put film through it and you go back and forth and you get all that flashing effect and stuttering effect. I mean, Tony did a great job on that movie. So
Joel is asking if you were on the original Space Jam with Michael
Yes.
Jordan or the new one with LeBron?
No, I'm with Michael. That's the original. I didn't even see the second one. I won't go there with that one. So
His question though is also how much green screen was involved in the original?
Oh, quite a bit. Yeah, a lot of green screen with Michael and all that stuff, especially with all the characters and all that stuff. So, and actually all the cartoon characters were basically in green suits. So we used the Growlings, which is a comedian group, and we used those guys as actors so that they'd be on their knees or sitting on an apple box for the different height variations. And then we would so that Michael had somebody to talk to. It was very important that we did that. The director, Joe Pitka, was very smart about doing all that stuff. So Michael could talk to people. It was really good.
And of course, now, if that film was done, I imagine with the LeBron one, the only difference is they would have the actual actors in motion capture suits, like actually like recording what their body movements are.
Yeah, they
and
probably
then
would
being
be able to do that.
translate
Yeah, absolutely.
Another question from Kaya, she was asking, are there advertisements within the episodes? Sounds like product placement or integration.
On the Rookie?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
ADT.
ADT. We usually do that once a year where they press the codes and that all, that helps pay for a few things.
Yeah. There's a little bit of what we call like integration products. For the most part, there isn't. The commercials are really in between the acts, like what Bill Rinier laid out. But occasionally we do showcase a particular product. And by doing that, we actually get paid by them to do it. So the example is we have an episode coming up where our characters activate their alarm in their house. So this is done in conjunction with ADT. But for the most part, maybe once a season, we might do something like that. Cassandra has a question here. How long does it take to air an episode? Cassandra, we'll wait till Helen, who's our post-production producer, comes on.
That's probably best.
And she'll be able to deal with that. So in the meantime, I think Zhao is on right now. Zhao, are you ready to take over?
Sure, yeah. Although Bill's a hard act to follow.
Oh, please.
So,
I have been lurking, so I know what you've been talking about.
I'm introducing Giao-Chau. Everyone calls her Zhao. She's the production designer on The Rookie, and she's here to explain a little bit about what the production designer does and how she got here.
So as a production designer, I am in charge of the look of a show. So Bill talked about the camera. The camera basically points to everything that I would be in charge of. In this case, and I think Marco showed you that chart that showed kind of our realm of influence as the art department, or what I consider our art department umbrella. I'm in charge of a lot of departments, actually. So we both design the sets, we build the sets, we bring in greens to dress the sets. One of the people that reports to me is the set decorator. They are basically in charge of filling the sets with everything you could possibly imagine. So if you imagine like the house that you moved into when it's completely empty, that would be designed by my department, drawn up, built by construction, painted by our paint department. And then set deck would come in and bring all the furniture, everything that you see in your house. That would be what set deck's in charge of. And then another department under us is props. Props is in charge of anything that the actor touches, manipulates, things like that. And then there's like what I call like the realm of influence. So I work with a location manager to determine the locations that we're shooting in. Like for instance, that photo that Marco showed of the helicopter is in a downtown location, and we chose that very specifically to both fit our needs for what the helicopter needed to do, but also to tell the story. I know Bill talked about nothing would exist, including my job, without the writers and the script, and that's true. And I think that if there's any boss that all of us answer to, it is the script. And so yeah, so that's pretty much what I do in terms of that. In fact, that photo right there is a good example of several departments working together, but all departments kind of in my sphere of influence. This is a house on the back lot at Warner Brothers. I think it was an episode that aired a few weeks ago where the fire lieutenant's house exploded in flame. And then what we need to do was very quickly dress in the post-explosion bit. You'll see smoke machines there. Special effects is another department that's in our sphere of influence. And we work with them to make sure that we can tell the story really the best way that we can. So in terms of what I do, I'm in charge of a good chunk of our personnel. Actually, it's about 30% of our crew is under my umbrella. And yeah, it all starts from the script in that way. How I got here, I started in theater. I was a theater designer. I studied it in my undergraduate. I kind of fell into the set design class, just trying to fulfill a requirement. And I fell in love with it and kept on doing it. And thought I was going to become a set designer in theater. And so I worked I did props in theater, I painted in theater, I assisted a bunch of people, I worked on a Broadway show as an assistant. And the fact is that as a theater designer, you just don't make very much money. It's really, really very difficult to make a living. So most theater designers also do something else. They teach in graduate school or they go to graduate school and they end up teaching at the university level. And that was my plan. So I went to grad school here in LA at Cal Arts, and Cal Arts happened to have this class at USC that they had an agreement with. So I took that USC class where I helped design a film, and I basically never looked back. I just kept on doing it. The professor of one of those classes had me do his feature film that summer, and I just stayed in the industry. Right after grad school, I worked as a PA on a television show, again, from one of the professors of USC. They hired me. So I found myself, because I had spent the first half of my adult life so far working in theater, and I went to grad school quite late, actually, in my mid-30s. I found myself as a 36-year-old PA getting people lunches. And that's what I did, because that is kind of what you have to do to make it in this business. And so from there, I worked my way up. I, from PA, became a coordinator in the art department, which basically manages our art department in many ways. And then I became an assistant art director. It's kind of the first step to being leading up to production designer. Art directors, they, as a production designer, you have the vision, you work with the director, you work with the location manager, you work with the DP, but then there's other people below you that actually have to make it happen. And the people that are in charge of that logistically are the art directors. So I started working as an art director, and then I got promoted production designer, and I was really lucky. I made the move really fast from when I started PAing about 9 years ago to production designing about 4 years ago. It took me about 5 years to make that jump, which is a little unusual. And I think I attribute a lot of that to the fact that I had a whole career before starting in theater and film. Yeah, that was kind of my career trajectory and how I got here. That's it, I think, that I have. So are there any questions?
Okay, we have a question here. It's from Genevieve, and it is.
That's my daughter's name, by the way. It's a great name, Genevieve.
Genevieve, do you want to log on and you can ask it, or I can read it?
Well, that's great that that's her name. I'm finding that it's more common among people now.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's great to meet you. And so originally what I was trying to ask is because for our past summer's productions that we did, we had 2 short films, and we actually just introduced bringing in a production design department, which I'll say is much smaller and only consisted of maybe like 4 people. But we did have our graphic design instructor actually lead that. She was the one that had the most artistic ability in that sense to be able to lead it. Because we don't have a lot of art departments here, at least at the DigitalNest, but do you ever find, and I know it's not common, but do you ever find any graphic design artists that ever make their way into the industry under the production design department?
Oh, absolutely. So one thing, I'm sorry, I didn't bring a fancy art department chart, but I should have. In the art department, so I told you about all the other departments that are under us, but we have like an office too, what I call the art department office, that includes a graphic designer and a set designer. And so what's great is if you have an interest in art or architecture and doing something in kind of the realm of what we do, there's a job for you in the industry. Like graphic designers, they are critical to what we do, and it's a full-time job in my department here on this show. So yeah, absolutely, you know, and I will say that most art directors, assistant art directors, even our PAs and coordinators on lower budget projects, you have to do that. When I was doing indie film and lower budget projects, you know, I had to design the graphics and print them and build my set and paint the set and go to the prop house and get all the furniture and dress it. And so yeah, and our graphic designer actually does a lot more for me too, besides just the signage, because you know, like we shoot on the back lot or we'll shoot on location, and I need to be able to change the signage to tell the story, or just cover up the signage because we're not allowed to show it for whatever reason. And the graphic designer does that, but they also design wallpaper for me. Like I love designing wallpaper and having our own wallpaper finishes, and they'll design that as well. So they'll do a lot of Photoshop work for us as well. Like if we need to age somebody, or we show a photo where, you know, 2 people aren't together and we have to put them together, you know, all of that work falls under the purview of our genius graphic designers.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I was going to say graphic design is actually probably what I've noticed in the last 20 plus years. It has skyrocketed the demand in not only just film industry, but I know just in, I want to call it the outside world, but just web design, content creation for so much in this now digital age. And we actually, like Zao was saying, we see it here on ours where, I mean, years ago, Zao would be selecting samples from wallpaper design books. And here instead she sees one and says to the designer, hey, I like this, but make these changes. And boom, you know, instant, well, not quite instant wallpaper, but you know.
Almost instant. Yeah, I mean, that part of the industry has changed like drastically in the last 20 years because of computers. And in general, just my I mean, I think that every department, but definitely our department, I learned how to hand draft. I went to college 25 years ago, you know, and so, and now hand drafting is quite rare because we don't have the time for it. Everything's done by computer. Graphic design back in the day was cutting out letters and then placing them, you know? So yeah, it's changed quite a lot.
So while we wait, if there's anyone's got any questions for Zao regarding production design or, you know, stuff like that. Zao, I got a question for you, and that is, what's probably been the most challenging film or TV show that you worked on, and why? Like, what made it challenging?
I worked on the first season of Supergirl. It's a CW show that actually shot here at Warner Brothers. At least the first season did. It now shoots up in Canada. It was difficult. I started as the assistant art director on that show. I got bumped up to art director. It was the first time I had art directed anything. It was a massive show that was massively under budget or over budget. And so I think the first difficulty was that we were the art department that replaced the original art department. On first season shows, especially these kind of big, very ambitious shows, there's a lot of turnover the first year, just in terms of people get burned out or it's not the right fit. And so we came in after people had been working every single day. Our construction department hadn't had a day off in, I think, 3 or 4 months when we started. So everybody was really angry and they were in terrible moods all the time. I was a young, I wasn't physically young, but I was a young art director early in my career, and it was hard to get a lot of respect, to be honest with you. I think that they threw that same attitude at the experienced art director that left the show before me, but it felt even heavier, just kind of dealing with my own insecurities and newness and that type thing. And the show was just hard. It was, as you can imagine, watching these superhero shows, there's a lot of effects, there's a lot of stunts, and we're on a television timeline, which you'll hear from Helen shortly, is very short. Everything has to happen very quickly. We have very little prep time, and it makes it difficult. So I would say, yes, that was the most challenging, difficult show I've done so far. Thankfully, coming back to the Warner Brothers lot on the Rookie, it's been night and day difference, you know?
Well, it's still, that's something that is time. You hear a lot of this in filmmaking. Time is money, right? And I mean, Rookie's classic example in our next episode, we have basically one build to do. But it's a pretty substantial build that you're kind of using a set that we had built a season ago and kind of actually adding on to it. And how many days do you have to do it?
We have 4 days.
Right.
We have 4 days to actually build a set until you shoot it, which is crazy when you think about it, because, you know, houses take 9 months to build. And our timeline, like what Marco was saying before, we have 7 days to prep an episode. So in that 7-day period, we get the script, we examine what we need, we go look for the locations, we determine what sets we're going to build or what sets we need to augment. I come up with a plan and a design for all of that, and then it happens in about a week and a half. It's something that is still wild to me whenever I think about it, but it is the magic of what we do too.
It's that giant assembly line of then construction and the prop makers and the scenics, working some long hours to quickly fabricate all the set walls needed and assemble it. And it all starts with the plan that you provide, basically.
Yep. It's fun though. I will say it's why I chose to continue with film and television and leave theater. I love the fast timelines. I mean, do I wish I had like 2 or 3 more days most of the time? Yes. But in theater, I would get a script and I would have months to like design one and kind of obsess over one set. And then, you know, it would be 9 months before something would happen. And in film and television, I think of it as like boot camp. I have to work so fast that I found out that fit my personality better, actually. And I like it. I like being able to occupy a different world and a different character every day. I get to do something different. And that is kind of the magic of what we do and why I love what I do.
I think that's a common thread that a lot of people are going to hear. But anyways, we're going to move on to our next speaker. And Helen Pei is our post-production producer.
Hi. Helen Pei.
Pie. Did I? Sorry, Helen.
2 seasons together, Marco. Maybe 3.
Actually 3, I think, but yeah. Okay, my bad.
No, it's okay. Hi. Oh, do I go now?
Yes, it's if I was the director, I'd say action. But also, I just want to point out, Zao, if you go into the chat area, someone's had a question. You can reply to them in the chat area about color palettes for scenes and stuff like that, or some of your thoughts are on color. So, and then turning it over to Helen Pei, our post-production producer. So if you could just kind of give us an outline of what you do and how you got to this position. You know, what was the steps that you took?
Right. What I do is I take everything that production has done, and once production is finished filming it, I make sure we get it to the finish line. So I make sure that the cut is put together and that it is presentable for air, I guess, essentially. So I take everything and finish it and deliver it to the studio, the network, and they air it. So I'm just responsible for the back half of the show, I guess, if you will. My path to post was a little bit different. I didn't start in post. I started actually as a writer's assistant, and because I wanted to be a writer, and I went that route for a number of years. And I worked on a show called Gilmore Girls, and on Gilmore Girls, I was a script coordinator. And because I started in multicam, which is you start with the writers at the beginning and you get to see the finished product at the end, I really missed that part of the process in the single camera world. And so when I was on Gilmore Girls, I had worked with the showrunner on a couple of shows, and I just asked if I could start tagging along to some of the post part of the process just so I could see it finished. And so I started going to the sound mix, and I would hear things that she would have problems with that nobody else heard. And so she started to leave me at these sound mixes, and I would just kind of guide the mixers and the post team that was already in place to the pieces that they couldn't hear. That's a weird way of getting into the post world, but then I found that I really liked it. I felt that I was sort of naturally drawn to it, and sort of the technical pieces of it were very natural to me. And so when Gilmore Girls ended, I needed to sort of figure out what I wanted to do. And there were some gaps in my post sort of history. And there was an opening on a show called Grimm. And so I took a step back and worked as post supervisor on that show because I really wanted to understand the visual effects process a little bit better. And that was really an insightful time for me. And then after that, I just started getting post producer gigs. And I think because of my history working on the writer side, it just really helped me understand the post process a lot better. To me, the post process is a lot like writing because it's the final rewrite on the script. So that's kind of my weird path to post.
Can you kind of walk? So I would say can you, like a couple minutes, because this is a big loaded question, but could you walk us through the post process? Because this is like, for years, we used to say we'd have a problem on set when we're filming, and we would say, oh, we're going to fix it in post.
Right.
Nowadays, we almost say like, hey, we're going to create it in post, VFX, things like that. But from the, like today, for instance, we're filming, those dailies, that all the shot material gets transferred and gets ported over to you in the post to the editors. Can you just kind of walk us through like the steps of now, the editor has their hands on it. What do they do?
Sure. So every day we, the footage will go to the post house where they will process dailies. And then the dailies will come over to the editors, and then they just start cutting the scenes together. Pre-COVID, we were doing this in person. Post-COVID, now everything is remote. And so some of the challenges that I have in post is if the internet goes down, we can't work. So I guess I'm sort of throwing in challenges along with the process, but the editor has, 9 days of dailies to cut, and then they have about 4 days after that to actually assemble the show. At that point, it would go to the director. The director will have 4 days to work on their cut before it goes to our producers. At that point, our producers will spend about 5 days before it goes to the studio. The studio will then give their notes. We address them, turn it back around in a day, give them a second pass. They'll give some additional notes if they have them. And if they don't, then we just lock the cut. And from that point, we start working on the finishing part of the process, which is cleaning up any, doing any visual effects, which would be on this show, be a lot of like muzzle flashes. It'd be a lot of crew cleanup. It would be.
When you say crew cleanup, what does that mean?
That means if we have crew and equipment in the shot, we would paint them out.
And where do you usually, what's the number one, other than body cam, where do you find a lot of these issues? Reflections, basically.
Well, we find them everywhere. We do have reflections, but you'd be surprised how many times, and again, with COVID now, it's a different little challenge, but there are times when a background will come out of a door and he's got a mask on. I think people just forget to take those things off. And so it just happened to be the best take. And so we just either have to take the mask off, we have to paint the guy out, we have to put something in front of him, we just have to hide it.
So, a question we had earlier on from someone was, so how long does it take to air an episode? So in other words, on the final day of shooting, how many days do you have before it's being telecast?
I think it depends on the episode. At the beginning of the season, obviously we have a lot more time. And, the funny thing is, like, I never look at it as like the total number of days. I just look at my schedule, and from the time that we lock to the time that we go to the sound mix, I like to have at least 2 weeks if I can, because you want to have most of your visual effects done by the time you get to the sound mix. The sound mix and the final playback is really your last chance to see everything finished. And if you have any last minute tweaks, that's the point that you have, and then you have to deliver the episode 3 days later. So I think the tightest time that we've had between lock and delivery, I think, was 28 days. It might be a little bit tighter. But 28 days to me is very tight, especially because we can have up to 150 visual effect shots that we're doing in one episode, and we have probably 3 or 4 episodes open at one time. So you're juggling anywhere from 100 to 150 visual effect shots per episode, and trying to figure out how to place those in and put them in the right spot. So being organized is obviously very key to this job.
What another question we had from Joel was, what editing software do we use?
We use the Avid. Yeah, we use Media Composer on the Avid.
For people who are just starting out editing on their own, is that, what do you usually suggest for them to use?
Well, I think this world is different. I mean, there was a point where Avid was the only software. Now a lot of people use Final Cut. I think they're all kind of similar. So I think once you know one, you can probably translate over to the other one. But I think the standard for the industry is the Avid.
Another question from Marcus. So what qualities do you look for in junior editors or assistant editors and post-production assistants, qualifications or experience? And then his second part of the question is, where do you look for opportunities to start out at a post-production house? So what do you look for in these junior positions, and where should he where should he target in terms of trying to get in?
I think what I look for in like a junior editor or junior assistant editor would be, I think technical skills are really important. Organization is really important, especially with an assistant editor. Flexibility and not being afraid of hard work, because, you know, our hours can be really, really long. I think a lot of people have sort of preconceived ideas of what the job is going to be. And so I need someone to have an open mind about what the job actually is, especially if they've never done it. You know, especially on this show with the assistant editor, because we shoot so many, you know, this show uses a lot of different cameras. And that's a big challenge on the show because, you know, sometimes if you're getting footage from 18 different cameras, it's a little bit like a reality show. And how do you organize it in sort of a, you know, in a manner that your editor is going to understand it and so that they can see all the footage at one time. So organization, technical savvy is very important when it comes to assistant editor. For a post PA, it's really just a willingness to dive in and learn everything, you know. An interest in post is helpful. I've worked with a lot of people who want to be writers here, and sometimes they stay and sometimes they just want to move on to the writer side.
So another question from Jonathan is, how long did it take and how much did you have to work on these editing apps or programs to feel happy with what you produce?
I'm not sure if I fully understand that question.
Well, I guess, let me try to translate a little bit better. What did, or if, you know, Jonathan, if you want, you can tune in with your audio and ask it directly, or if you're more comfortable, do it through the chat. Maybe perhaps when you were starting out, like how long did it take in terms of using editing software before you became like really confident in being able to edit, so to speak?
Well, I myself am not an editor, so I think this is a better, this isn't really a question that applies to me. I think as a post producer, trying to determine what version of the software that you want to go to is more about working with the Avid vendor and asking them how much, you know, what problems other people have had with that version. I'm not sure if this is answering your question, but I think that's the closest I can get to it.
Yeah, or how long do you think it takes someone to kind of master the Avid system? That might be another way to ask it. In your experience with editors.
Well, the thing is with editors, you know, you look for editors who know how to use the Avid. I think probably when I started out, there were editors that weren't as familiar with the Avid and they just really needed a strong technical assistant editor. I think now all editors have to really understand how to do the Avid, especially in television where the time is so tight, as Giao mentioned. Sometimes, you know, you have to get these notes addressed really quickly. And if you're trying to figure out how the Avid works, it's not going to work in a television broadcast environment. It's most broadcast shows don't have the time for you to figure out how to use the Avid in order to get this note done. I don't know that if you could put a time frame on it. I think it's about sort of your technical background and how quickly you pick up on things like this. So I'm not sure if I could fully answer this question.
If someone gets a job as a post-production PA, post-production assistant, what should they do in order to become an assistant editor? Like, what would be the route to become that assistant editor?
I think it's letting the team know what you're interested in. And then I think it's observing as much as you can what the assistant editor does and then waiting for an opportunity.
And what does the assistant editor do for the editor?
So the assistant editor will take all the dailies that come in, they organize it. They organize it by scene. So if you have 3 different cameras in one scene, they'll group it together. And, some of it is how your editor wants it as well, but it's basically organizing the dailies for your editor. And then once the editor has finished his cut, it's about sound work. It's about cleaning up the sound, making everything sound smooth, giving it the backgrounds, putting in some music if that's what your editor wants you to do. It might be stepping in to do some temp ADR. It's just about filling the gaps that are missing it as in a temp way, so that once the show locks, we can finish it properly with our loop group or with our actors, with ADR with our actors, with the sound mix team, where they actually go in and they finesse the sound and they do the Foley and they make it all sound pretty by the time we broadcast it.
And last question, then you'll be out of the hot seat, and we'll move on to Vidal, who's our key grip. So the last question, it's from Marcus. I don't know, Marcus, you want to, you can log in on the microphone if you want, camera, or I can read it from the screen.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and hop on. Can you guys hear me? All fine?
Yeah.
Go? All right, great. Yeah, so Helen, a lot of our members, they do a lot of different projects such as commercials and corporate gigs and things like that. And usually they have the opportunity to edit, but they also have the opportunity to go ahead and practice other secondary skills such as visual effects, motion graphics, color grading, sound design, and sound mixing. Do all of those other sort of skills matter when trying to break in, or is their best chance to sort of break into a post house or the industry just to streamline specializing, learning editing exclusively?
I think all of those skills help you. So I think they do matter. I think if you could have that experience, it's going to give you a leg up. Absolutely. I think I'd be more inclined to hire an assistant editor or a post PA that has that history, because it shows an interest in the field. It shows an interest in a dedication.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Helen, thank you very much for your time. I know you're slammed.
A little split focused, but so I hope I was helpful.
No, you are, absolutely. So at this time, I want to introduce Vidal Cohen. He's our key grip on the show, and Vidal can explain what a key grip does, what the grip department does, and as well as like how we got into it.
Hello, everybody. I'm not sure how many of you are here, but thanks for having us. The grip department is really the on-set engineering department. We're sort of responsible for a little bit of safety on set. More than that, though, camera positioning and camera movement is a lot of the work that my department handles. As the key grip, that just means that I'm the head of the department. So my department is the grip department, and I just head up those guys. So a lot of being a grip and a key grip is common sense. It's sort of an innate mechanical ability to see how things work. And I came to that through the Marine Corps. I started out in the Marine Corps. I joined out of high school, spent a few years in the Marine Corps, and then transitioned into the film business through a friend that I knew. And I started as a PA and tried a bunch of different jobs. I was an electrician for a while. I tried being a non-unit AD for a while. And then I wound up as a grip, and that sort of fit my personality. And actually, Marco and I worked together many, many years ago in the non-union world with a place that doesn't exist anymore. But it was a great proving ground for up and coming people. A lot of actors, a lot of crew people came through there. And Roger Corman allowed you to be able to try a bunch of different stuff. And that's the thing that I would say to you is try a bunch of different things and see what fits your personality best. Some people are going to say, oh, I really want to do this. Maybe you don't have the aptitude for that. And so find something that suits you the best and go for that. So in my case, being a key grip and the problem solving that comes along with being a key grip was really great for my personality. So that's sort of what I wound up as and what I've been doing now for a long time. And it's great to have a bunch of really talented people working with me and to be able to game time solve problems that we come up against. So that was sort of my transition into grip department. I don't know if you guys have had the opportunity to go on a soundstage or what your level of experience is, but everything that hangs in a soundstage, everything that hangs on a set is my department. We start out, we give them the electricians points to hang on if we need to. We give, oh, there we go. We build car mounts, as I said earlier. Everything that we do is about putting the camera where the DPs want it. In this case, we have cameras on cars. There's an overhead, the ceiling pieces, and everything that's hanging there. I don't remember what set that is, but so yeah, the main thing about being a grip and actually being in the film business period, because every department has their own unique challenges, but it's about being able to think on your feet and be able to solve problems as they come up. So in this picture here, there's actually 4 cameras on this car, and if you look at the very top of the car, there's a stunt person that will drive this car from the top of the car, from the roof of the car, and the little pod, that's called a pod car. And it allows the actors to act without having to think about driving. So the driver sits on top of the vehicle and takes care of all of that, the acceleration, the braking, turning, and the actors hold onto the steering wheel and they say their dialogue. And this particular picture here, we have 4 cameras so that we can capture 2 different angles on each actor, different sizes, all at the same time. The fewer times we need to repeat something, the faster we can go and the less it costs. So that's that's called a pod car, and it's a hood mount on there. But that's actually one of the tools that we use that helps, and we're on that quite a bit. Anybody questions?
While we're waiting, if any questions come up, here, let me pull up another picture, show, like, for instance, what the grips will be doing. Like, here's a classic example, this dolly track here. And this was from Friday night. Should look familiar. What's motivated, what happened here, basically, that DP called for a certain shot, and then what did that translate to?
So the DP called for a shot. In this case, our actor is coming in from the right side of the frame, and we wanted to follow our actor from the police car sort of down the street, up the driveway, and into the house, towards the house a little bit. So we put the camera on dolly track here. It's on what we call apple boxes, because we needed to make it level from one end of the track to the other. It needed to be level. So on the curb side of it, it was about 14 inches difference. So we put 14 inches of stuff in there to make the tracks level. And that allowed us, there's actually a jib arm on there. It allowed us to start up high, swing down with the actor as they move. You can kind of see the dolly there. Swing down with the actor as they moved, push in through the gate, and then get back up high again at the end there to see the whole house if we needed to. So that's one aspect of it. Camera movement and camera placement is a big portion of what I do.
Would you say now, being a key grip, and let me come to this chart, and I realized while Zhao was talking, I had completely left out art director, art department coordinator, like an entire, like so many different positions. But so being the key grip, you're working hand in hand with the gaffer basically for the DP. If someone's interested in becoming a director of photography, is coming in through the grip route or coming through the electric route also like a way to become that DP?
Yes, it absolutely is a way to become a DP. A lot of DPs that I've worked with have come up through the electrical side of things, gaffing first, and then making the transition to being a DP. Some DPs come through the key grip route as well. The gaffer and the key grip both work closely together, and the director of photography is our immediate boss. The director and the director of photography will talk, figure out what the shots are. The DP will bring that to us and say, this is what we want to do. And then the gaffer, who you're going to meet next, Sean, he and I will figure out how we're going to do that, how we're going to make the dolly move, or how we're going to light the scene the way to give the director what he wants, and also to give the director flexibility, because directors don't always know what they want.
So here on the chart, we have key grip. And the next one, I'm sure a lot of people always ask this question. I don't know if you can see it there, but
There you go.
best boy grip. I might be putting you on the spot with this question, but what is the origin of best boy grip?
So as with anything in the film business, there's a lot of legend that goes along with it. But as I was told when I was a young grip, the grip business used to be mainly families. It was a father would be the key grip, and then all of his sons were grips, or his nephews, cousins. And when I first started in the business, that was very true. There were several families that sort of ran the grip unions and everything. But the best boy was literally the best boy. He was the second in charge, and he was usually the eldest son. And so he would be the best boy. And then everybody else were the grips. Dolly grip is another specialty, which is actually, there's several dolly grips I know that have made the move to being directors of photography. Yes, dolly, key grip, rigging, rigger. That's the flow chart there, yeah. So, but yeah, the best boy was the best boy. Literally, it was the eldest son, the best boy. That was the legend as I heard it.
And so as you're a member of a union, it's the IATSE Local 80. What are some suggestions if someone wanted to get into being a grip? What are a couple of the career routes that you could suggest to them? Because there's not just one clean way to get in.
No, there's not. It is a great time to get in now because it's very busy. But Local 80 and most locals, they don't have an apprenticeship program anymore per se, but we have something called a permit list. So if you wanted to be a grip, you could go to the local. They have a little orientation, and then they put you on the grip permit list. And that means that when everyone that's working in the local everyone is working, then, and we still need people, we will go and hire permits, which are people that don't necessarily have any experience at all, but we still need a body to work with us for the day. So you sort of get on the job training while you're getting paid, which is fantastic. Once you get 30 days on a union job, then you're eligible to join the union and become a union member. If not everybody is working in the union, if there are people available, then you can't take a call. But once you get to know people and people know you and like you, then they call you instead of just calling the saying I need anybody. They'll say, hey, I want Joe or I want Bill. So
a question that's come in from Jonathan. He's asking, is a good question here. How much experience as a key grip or gaffer do you need in order to become a director of photography?
That varies. I mean, that's a hard one to quantify, only because everybody learns at a different pace and everybody comes with different skills. It takes a long time, years, to be truly proficient at being a gaffer or a key grip, because there are so many things that you need to know and so many components of the job. And starting out as a grip and working your way up can take 10 years. And then going on from there. I have a good friend who is actually directing now. He started life as an editor and then started gaffing, started actually an electrician and then gaffing. He moved from gaffer to director of photography on a show called Malcolm in the Middle. And then a little later down the line, he started directing. They're all sort of intertwined. Everything, there's a lot of crossover between all of those. And the more that you know, the easier that transition becomes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think are there any other questions for Vidal? It's the grip department is kind of like what I call the unsung heroes basically on the set, because it's probably one of the most challenging jobs in that they are servicing every single department. When they have a problem, when they need some help with something, there's one department that they turn to, and it's the grip department. Every other department, they kind of work, they are, I want to say they don't really serve other departments. So the electricians aren't going to like serve any other department other really than themselves. Or Sean might correct me, he's on next. Or same with camera department. They're not going to like serve the grip department or electric department or production or whatever. But grip department focuses on everything and everyone. And really what they do is, like, if people can see from this picture here, the rigging that's required just to put those cameras there. It took a long time, I think Vidal could say, to like come up with the right formula to make that work. We know a basic approach, and then it's just a lot of fine tuning, time after time doing it. So
it's a lot of fine tuning. It's also, you have to have a certain, like I said earlier, innate sort of mechanical ability. You have to be able to look at things. In this particular case, I don't know how well you can see from the picture, there's steel pipe going across the hood of the car. We started out with aluminum pipe, and once we started adding more lights and more cameras to this, the aluminum pipe was flexing too much. So we had to use something stronger. So then we went to steel pipe in the rig here, just to make it stiff enough so that the cameras and everything could stay on there. The cars, we don't do a lot of crazy driving stunts normally, but we do some of that stuff, and it needs to be able to sit on that car and not move, not pop off of there if we do high-speed turns and things like that. So we're talking about there's probably 140 pounds of stuff that's on the hood of that car. Kaya, let's see, what happens if a camera breaks? Are you able to easily replace it? Yes, there's a whole financial component to it, which Marco can tell you about, but the cameras are rented from a rental house, a place that actually rents cameras. And so when we have an issue with the camera, generally we try not to break them because they're expensive, but when we have an issue with the camera, we can either get another camera from them or send the camera and get it repaired from them, or get the piece that we need and repair it. I don't know who's on from camera, but they'll have more information on that.
Bill Rowe's been heading up camera, but
Oh,
anyways,
wow.
Vidal.
You just call Panavision and they get another one. That's how I do it.
That's right.
Not quite that simple, but
They
anyways,
send Marco,
just wanted to.
they send Marco the bill.
Yeah. Thank you for your time and joining on. And I was going to introduce Sean, who's our gaffer.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Well, yeah, so like Marco said, I'm the gaffer. I am the chief lighting technician, is what it says on my paycheck. Gaffer is an old school term. I think it comes from England, and it's a stick with a hook on it. So you can use your stick to change the lights. And I guess back in those days, you were the gaffer if you had the stick. So like Vidal was saying, that, we work in directly under the director of photography, and we are in charge of lighting the scenes wherever we are. We shoot on stage a lot, but we're also on a lot of different cool sets and locations. Underneath me, I have a set of lighting technicians that helps me, set up the lights and provide electricity to other departments. And Marco is wrong. We do provide electricity for a lot of other departments. Everybody has a phone that has to be charged. There's, blow dryers for the hair department. There's, monitors that need to be plugged in. There's fans for special effects. There's work lights, so people can see and they don't trip on things. So we are very busy providing electricity for a lot of different departments. Thank you, Marco. But primarily we are there to help facilitate lighting the scenes and getting the actors lit. If you cannot see the actors, we don't have a show, right? That's why it's lights, camera, action. So, it's my favorite line. No lighting, no show. Let's see, I wrote some notes here. So to me, the most important job for the gaffer is to create kind of a balance within the scene. So if we have like a high key situation where we need to balance the daylight to like a dark space, we need to be able to have the tools to make that happen. Personally, I want to be able to give the DP the flexibility to be as creative as possible. So I would say that a lot of the balance lighting situations I would handle myself, and then it allows the DPs to bring in whatever creativity they want to bring into the situation as far as lighting goes.
What do you find, like, so typically if we show up at a location, let me pull up that. This is literally Friday night's location, right? And you can kind of see up in the upper part of the photo here, that balloon light. But, when you showed up and we're talking to the DP, what were some of the things that you asked them, basically, like, what do you want it to look like here? What are some of the things you want to do?
Well, a lot of these decisions, are made on your prep days and your scout days. The DP goes out to these locations before with the location scouts and Marco and a few others, and they kind of decide with the director as well to kind of decide which way they're going to shoot the scenes, and that gives us a kind of a general idea of where we want our big sources, our broad strokes, as they say, to bring up our balance. So we need to have some sort of low-level ambience to at least expose the film or the videotape or whatever. So in this scenario, we have our balloon light over the top of the house just to bring up that, area so it's not pitch black. And we also have, if you can look at the palm trees on the left side of the image, we have a big light and a condor that's acting like a moonlight. So we have a little bit of both. We have a little bit of warm and a little bit of cool light, kind of giving us some dynamic depth to the scene.
I think we have a question here from Genevieve.
So what has been the most intricate scene you've had to, and not even considering the Rookie, but any works that you've done, what's been the most intricate scene you've had to light?
Oh, that's a good question. I've done a lot of green screen work. So many years ago, I did a movie called Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow. And I was in charge of the Los Angeles portion, which was all shot on green screen. So that was pretty interesting. In that scenario, you have to light your green screen. You have to light your green screen to a level that the video effects department likes, and then you have to light your actors and whatever elements you have in that scene. So there can be a lot of different things coming in and out of it, stuff like that. I've also done a lot of cool stop motion work, some miniature work, which was a lot of fun. And that's, I did, and there's also, I did, they call it motion control work for that show House, that TV show House. We did a lot of the cadaver shots where the camera would come into a body and reveal whatever the person was sick from. So we would do a lot of intricate little mirrors and little teeny lights just to put highlights on these prosthetic cadavers, and that was pretty neat.
What so if someone wants to become a gaffer, basically, or someone wants to learn how to light, I mean, this is kind of a twofold question. One is, you know, being a gaffer, is that a good segue into being a director of photography? But then also, how did you learn to light? Like, how did you, you know?
I come from a photography background. So I grew up in Florida, and, you know, in high school and junior high, I was really into photography. And that kind of segued into videography. I was into like surfing and skating videography. Back then, you know, in the early 2000s, it got really popular. I was never really into making narrative little short films back in those days. But that love for the photography end of it segued into wanting to go to film school. And ultimately I did go to film school. And film school gave me a lot of great experience, just because you get your hands on some equipment and you can just kind of go out there and screw something up and figure out what you did wrong and try to fix it. But you know, a lot of this ability is very easily learnable. We all hear about the three light setup where you have a key light, fill light, backlight, and you know, that's the easiest way to approach, you know, most lighting situations.
Jonathan has one of the students, he had a question. One was, do you find it stressful having to light everyone in the scenes? But then also, you know, how much time do you plan actually the lighting design basically of the show?
Since this is my first season on the Rookie, you know, a lot of this stuff was already set up for me. I made a bunch of changes coming into this season, but most of them were kind of on the, you know, the technical side, bringing in a little more technology as far as LED sources and stuff like that to the show. But most of that was already set up. But really you work, you know, the art department draws out, you know, your sets, and you can kind of picture, you know, a daylight and a nighttime scene for each set, and try to give you some, you know, different scenarios and lighting situations to kind of fit all of those elements. Is it stressful? Yeah, of course, this business is very stressful. But once you have some experience, you get a formula, you know. Once you know the formula, it's you know, there's no rules really how a scene should be lit. It's, you know, it's all up to artistic interpretation. You know, I'm working directly with the DP and trying to fulfill what they want the scene to look like. But for the most part, that stress does go down as you figure out that formula. I mean, I've been doing this 20 years, you know, and the formula is still, I see the question. Somebody asked, how long did it take you to find the formula? You know, I've been doing it for 20 years. So, you know, it's also evolving, you know, as I work here and as tomorrow's work, I don't think it will ever stop. That's what is exciting about lighting, because, you know, if you just watch the movies of the 80s and you watch the movies of today, I feel like we've kind of gone into a more realistic look as far as lighting goes. And it just changes, you know, what everybody wants to see.
Are there any other questions for Sean or Gaffer? All right, awesome. Well, Sean, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Logging on, and I'll introduce our next speaker is Julia Schklair. Julia is our costume designer on the show. By the way, a lot of these photographs have nothing to do with the jobs that people are actually doing. It's just, but I'm trying to show everyone just some behind the scenes snapshots of, you know, what that filming process looks like on the set. So Julia, if you're here.
I'm here.
Awesome.
Woo. Hi. How do I?
Yeah, we can hear you. if you want to, I think just a good template's just been, if you just explain a little bit, what does the costume designer do? And then how did you become one?
Okay, can you see me okay?
No, we don't see it.
I clicked on the link that Harrison sent. I can
Is
hear
there
you.
you see the video
The bottom
camera
left.
icon?
There we go.
Yep.
Okay. I don't know. I'm not sure what happened.
No, we
It's-
see it.
Oh, you okay? So I got started in this. I visited my oldest brother out here in California. I come from Chicago, and he was at film school at USC, and he had a class in violence, and he put this appliance on my neck and they slit my throat and I was bleeding on the floor. And I was so excited that you could get paid for something like that because it was really cool. And that's kind of what got me into it. But I started in the art department because I'm a painter and I have gone to art school my whole life. And once I started working in the art department, I realized that I am not linear at all. And what I really like is color and shapes and movement. And that lent to costume design. And I went to UCLA in their theater department and I took costume classes and graduated from there and have been working ever since. That's kind of how I got into this.
What does the costume designer do? Can you just walk us through,
Yes. So my job is to read the script and figure out how to make the world that these people live in visually from their clothing. You should know what they ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and who they are by what they're wearing within the first few seconds of seeing someone. And I take the script and I break it down by scenes to see how many outfits that I need and how much time that I have to make the character's movement from, good to bad or however it needs to be. And I put clothes on them that I think reflect the place that they're supposed to be in society, in their age group, in, if they're good, if they're bad, and however it is that makes you feel something when you see them. And that's my job.
And then you sent me that slide. Do you want me to pull that up?
Yeah, sure. These were just a few of the favorite costumes of different things that I've done. It varies by, whatever job that I'm on. And you can see how many different types of people get created for different types of jobs. There's bikers, wedding gowns, Japanese costumes within the show. Like the two ladies that look like Bonnie and Clyde, that was costumes within our show that we did. So they're all a little different and they're all a lot of fun, but they all evoke a response from the audience. Sometimes there's stunts where I need 8 of something and I have to account for rigs underneath their clothing or if they're getting wet or just about anything. If there's a drive double, somebody else is driving the car for them. So we have to make as many people match the original actor, and we have to have enough outfits if they're getting shot that we can do it a couple of times. I think in the last episode, or in the bottom corner, you can see Nathan's laying there with the other actor, and we had about 8 outfits for each person because they had varying stages of distressing and blood and gunshots. And so you have to kind of account for that as well.
So you talked a little bit about how you actually kind of started off in art department, but then you went to school for costume design at UCLA. And then when you got out, can you walk us through a little bit of like, so you just got your diploma, here you go. How did you get in? I mean, how did you get here?
I started calling anybody and everyone because I didn't grow up in a town, in a family that has you know, my brother, yes, but he went commercially and he did something completely different. So I didn't know anybody, and I started in films, and I called anybody that I knew that may have worked on a film. I sent my resume to everything. There's publications that have like jobs listed and things. Occasionally, like IMDb even has that now. I'm not quite sure what the publications are anymore because I don't usually use them anymore. But I just kind of hustled and called and didn't take no for an answer. And I sent my resume to every production company possible. And to get any job, just to get my foot in the door. And eventually, you know, people call you and one job leads to the next job, to the next job, to the next job. But the most important thing is you have to do your job while you're there and leave a good impression so that your next job is, you can get it from the job you have. It's your calling card. You know, people like people that are nice, hardworking, and dedicated to their job.
So this was my poor attempt to kind of like show everyone how all the jobs are. And in the course of this, of course, I left out some departments. But I'm looking at yours here, basically a costume designer, supervisor, set costumer. I put tailor down, a cutter fitter. But is there, if someone wanted, also there's the costumes PA. If someone
Yes.
wanted to get into the costume department, would they start as a costume PA or as a set costumer? Or?
Well, you definitely need to be in the union. It is a good idea, experience-wise, to know at least how to sew on a button. Some people really don't, and it's mind-boggling, but that is a good skill to have. And definitely a costume PA is a good place to start because you'll learn about everything that in that department about how to do it and how to do the job properly. Tailoring is a completely separate entity within our department, and unless you want to actually sew garments or that's what your emphasis is, that's terrific, but you can find that through other tailor shops or other people. It wouldn't help you to be a costume PA. You have to go find somebody that will take you under their wing in their own shop. I have a department of 9 people below me at this point on this job because it's a pretty big job. My supervisor, Scott, he handles all the day-to-day operations, and he's the hub of our department, and he handles all the paperwork. We do go over all the breakdowns and the budgeting together, and he makes sure I know what's coming up and what's going on. On my truck, I have Anna, she's the key costumer, and she is the person who makes sure that we have everything that we need for the next day, the day before, so that we're not missing anything. So there's a call sheet that comes out, and the prelim, which is the one that comes out early to make sure that, everybody has it correctly before it goes out at night. She makes sure that whatever's on that she has on her trailer for the next day. And if she's missing something, we have a few hours to make sure we get it to her. And then there's 3 on-set costumers. I have 2 costumers, costumer and shoppers that help me make sure that I have everything ready and for fittings and for shopping and things like that. And that's how sort of we work.
And then Genevieve has a question. I don't know, Genevieve, if you wanted to, I can read it or you can.
I don't see anything. So if you could read it, that would be terrific.
Yeah, I can go ahead and ask it. Hi.
Hi.
So what influences do you use or pull from when you create any of your costumes? Like, do you use any outside media or?
I do research on, like if it's a bad guy or bad character, it's usually from a certain part of town. So I'll do some research and pull up some images to see that, because visually you want to know that you're on track with what's in somebody else's head. And because my job is to make sure that their vision for this show is on track. So I can bring my own influences and my own style into it, but it has to be within the parameters of what this show is. So, and we do err on the side of realism on this job. Does that help?
Yeah.
And then,
Oh, I see. My
another question that's come up, Julia, and this, so you could actually answer one for on the union side, because this is it's a larger production, so everyone is union for the most part. But if in the, there's also the whole non-union world. So much of the reality TV is non-union. And Kaya has a question. I might be mispronouncing your name, and I so apologize. But she has a question that is, how would somebody become a shopper for movies?
You need to work your way up to that, because like my shopper, Heather, we've been together for at least 8 years because we have a shorthand and a trust. And I know that when she goes someplace, what's going to come back the next morning, because we move so fast in television, I'm going to have it covered head to toe, and I don't think about it. There's going to be enough options for me to choose from to pull together what we talked about. I take notes on all the characters, and so she knows where to go and what to do. Or if I'm looking for something specific, I give her photos of things. So that's a job that most people, most designers have somebody that's been working with them for a while, unless you are on a really big movie and you're one of 10 shoppers. Sometimes you can have that, but those are all union positions, and it does take you a little bit to work up to that. Costume PA on television is a non-union position. Our last PA worked with us for 3 years, and she finally got in. So it is possible. It is just a catch-22 in our union to be able to get that. You need to either be on a show that goes union, or you need to get into the costume shops, and you have to stay there for at least a year. But it's terrific, because I actually worked in this business a long time, non-union, and I got my days at a costume shop, and I learned a lot of things that I didn't really know, or the names for things, or how things work on every job. There's certain things. So it is beneficial if that's something that you can do. You're never too old to learn anything. Every day you should learn something, I think.
Good advice. Another question for you. This one's from Michelle. Why do shows and movies tend to avoid repeating outfits or pieces previously worn?
It's funny. It just looks that way, but we do repeat, a lot of shoes and some jeans and some jackets. It's like if you have 5 shirts and 5 pants and 5 coats, you can almost make 75 outfits out of it. It just, you have to put them together differently so people don't notice. And most people as an audience, they don't want to see the same thing. They look for, oh, that's so cool. And they'll remember stuff. So sometimes we do, but we don't cycle, like Nathan had a couple of shirts on from the pilot on this job, and we used them 2 other times during the season 1, just because it's that kind of a show. You don't want to always have something brand new. So, or we make it look old. So does that help? I hope.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Julia? I would just say, just to round it all out, in your career, what's been the most challenging show or incident, and why?
I absolutely love what I do, and I try to put myself in the position of the character to do my job. The most challenging jobs for me aren't necessarily what I have to put on screen, and it's about adapting to the way people speak, how to get into people's heads and figure out what it is that they're wanting. Not everybody is communicative in an appropriate way, and it's navigating egos and brains and people. My job is 70% psychology and 30% what I do. So the more I know how to, is this what you mean? The easier it is for me and my crew. So I think that's the most challenging thing.
That's true. Well, awesome. Well, Julia, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
See you
Good luck,
tomorrow.
everybody. Nice to see you, Marco. Don't always get to see your whole face.
And at this time, let me introduce, this will be our last speaker for this evening, Mike Casey. He's our property master. Mike, if you're on.
Yeah, I'm on. You hear me all right?
Yep.
All right. Hello. How are you?
So I think,
Hello
Mike,
there.
if you kind of, walk us through what a prop master does, or property master.
Well,
And then,
I think I had a, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, then
I think
after
I had
that,
an
just,
unknown
how you
profession
got there.
until, which one? Do you want me to tell them what I do or how I got there first?
I'd say start with what you do first.
All right, as the property master, I run the property department, and we are in charge of all the things an actor comes into contact with or uses in a scene. So anything, if it's a chef, we're dealing with all the pots and pans and knives. If it's a surgeon, we're using the surgical equipment. And like on our show, it's a cop show. So we're in charge of the guns and the belts, the police belts and the badges and whatever the bad guys are stealing at any given time. And we have to break down a script, or I break down a script, and have to procure, rent, buy, or fabricate all the things that we need for a scene. My guys will get my breakdown, and they'll keep track of the continuity, because the scenes aren't always shot in order. So sometimes you'll have people going into a building to do something, they're gonna rob the bank, and we won't shoot the interior until weeks later, or vice versa. And you have to keep track of what they had in which hand and who had what, and store it, label it, put it on the shelf. And when we go back to do the matching scene, we are tracking the continuity to make sure everybody and all the actors have the right stuff at the right time in the right place. And I have to do a budget. I have to estimate the cost of all the props that we get. And in an action show, I end up doing a lot of action shows. You have to anticipate the stunt rubbers. You do a lot of stunt stuff. So sometimes they'll have a rubber gun or a rubber baseball bat to integrate into the action sequence instead of using real ones. So you have to anticipate the costs of the rubbers if they don't already exist. You might have to make rubber molds of those weapons and have them painted accordingly. You have to have multiples, like with Julia, who does the costumes. I'll coordinate with her about stuff because they'll squib sometimes the actors to show that they got shot. And we'll need to do that a certain amount of times, because once the little squib is like a blood packet with an explosive, so it'll go off and now that one's ruined. So sometimes it's like a tactical vest or something I'm providing, and sometimes it's just wardrobe that Julia has. And we'll have to have multiples for all those kind of things. Any stunt sequence, you usually have multiples because things can get torn or broken during that sequence. So we have to anticipate those costs and put them together, and an estimate of what we think in TV it's an episode, and a feature film, what you anticipate the cost of the entire film to be for your needs departmentally. And I think, that's a small summary of what I do. I think props has to work with more departments than most departments. I have to coordinate with special effects. I have to coordinate with stunts. I have to coordinate with costumes. We do prosthetic stuff. So sometimes, I have to coordinate with hair and makeup as far as, wounds in a hospital or different elements of effects makeup. Sometimes it'll fall on to me if it's just a severed hand or an arm, or sometimes we have to coordinate depending on how that transpires in the story with hair and makeup. I have to coordinate with transportation a lot of the times. We have to put like the antennas and the license plates and some of the weapons and the radios inside the police vehicles. So we're coordinating with transportation, the Teamsters as well. So you have a lot of organizational skills that you have to have and keep track of a lot of different stuff. And I kind of fell into it. I did anticipate getting into the film business. I have a cousin that was a stuntman, and I had a cousin that was a grip. And they told me when I was in middle school or high school that if they could, they would help me get into the business. And when it was time, they couldn't. So I went to school. I was working at a record store in Hollywood while I went to school, and I was going to a junior college taking film classes. And a friend of a friend asked if I'd be interested in helping out on a commercial. And so I did. I was like 22, and it was a Jack in the Box commercial. And we were literally gluing the pita bread together. And I was like, we're gluing the pita bread? Is that like legal? Like, isn't that fake advertising? So that was the beginning of movie magic for me. And I was hooked, being on set at the same time I was going to classes. So I would go to classes and learn, and we would watch these films and we'd learn about the process while I was actually working on shows. And I slowly went from knowing a few people to knowing a lot of people. And I think within a year, I decided to just do it full time. I had enough contacts to work full time. So about 23, I worked commercials full time for a couple years. And then I got in the union on a movie of the week that went union in the middle of our filming. And being in the union opened it up beyond commercials. At the time, commercials were non-union. Now they're mostly union as well, but at the time they weren't. And after getting in the union, I had more access to television and feature films, and traveled the world and work on all kinds of interesting projects since then.
So you're a member of, I had a screen. Sorry, one second. You're a member of what we call Local 44. I had your nice little intro card here. Again, This is another, as with everyone, there's a photo that has nothing to do with props, other than, actually this one was the closest I could find. That if you can see my cursor, there's a prop here. It's a piece of paper that we needed to change what was written from what we had originally shot. And it was over a dirt hole. So here's the movie magic, like you said.
Oh, that's the insert shot of the letter that we had in that episode. That's right.
Yeah.
Of the poem. It was like the clue. Yeah.
Exactly. But so you're a member of Local 44, if IATSE Local 44, which is actually one of the largest unions in the business at the sheer number of personnel, because they're handling the property department, they're handling the set dressing department, and they're handling the construction department, and special effects as well.
Special effects, yeah.
All part of Local 44. If someone wanted to get into the props department per se, and you already kind of like gave a great example of how you got into it through a non-traditional route and through the non-union, but what are some other avenues that people could take?
Well, I do know that a couple of the prop houses, and there are some small prop houses and larger prop houses, that they employ certain people and are allowed to unionize a certain amount of, like, the dock workers, guys that like work and pull props and get orders together at the prop houses, that they can get into the union that way. A certain amount of time. But some of the prop houses have essentially a program where they work there long enough and they can get into the union. Additionally, as it is right now, it's so busy. I do know of a few people, when it is really busy, that when the union can't fill all the positions, you can get membership from the roster, an experienced roster of non-union members who've signed up to be on this roster. And based on that, then when no one's available, you can call and ask for one of those people to be brought into your show. Usually it's someone you know, or someone that has been recommended, and you'll say, hey, it's busy enough. Would you mind trying to hire so-and-so? We worked with them and they were a PA on this job and they want to get into 44. And on that recommendation, you might call the hall and go, hey, I need somebody. I understand we're pulling from the roster, the experienced roster. Would this person be available to be hired? And I think that's initially how you can start to get your 30 days, which I think is a standard across all the unions and guilds. Get 30 days and then you qualify to become an official member of a union.
So when someone's become a prop master, that can be your career. You can work entirely as a prop master and have a very nice career as that. Are there other positions though that a property master can transition into?
You can, yes, but you're kind of going into, there's no up in our position. And that's essentially, I guess, if you wanted to become a production designer, which is, some prop masters pursue the production designer. I know that our production designer at one point had been a prop master. if that's where you choose to go. But in our union, that's the ceiling, is the prop master for that. I can go work as a prop assistant for other people, and I do go and work as an assistant on some feature films where I become the second unit prop master, which I really enjoy doing. It's usually most of the stunt sequences, it's most of the action, and you will go with the stunt guys, and you're going to go do all the scenes that are the, like, let's blow it up, let's explode it, let's out in the ocean or up in the mountains. And it's kind of fun to do the second unit action sequence stuff on a film. I enjoy it. And but every position presents its challenges. The set is a tough one, and right now we have Chris Schultz, who runs the set, and he has to, you know, work with the cast and the director and have all the things prepared and run all the props on the set. And that's a demanding job, and I enjoy doing that too. It's something that you get to do as a prop master more often on a feature film, because you're prepping from the very beginning with your department and your crew, and then you go shoot the film and you get to work with your set crew. In episodic, I'm consistently prepping, so I don't get to spend as much time on the set as I would on a feature, because we are already prepping the next episode simultaneously while we're filming a current episode.
Does anyone out there, does anyone have any questions for Mike? You can tune in, speak over the microphone, or enter to the chat. In the meantime, we're waiting if there's any questions. For me, like, a common question I've been asking a lot of people, which was like, what was the most challenging either film or prop design that you had to do in your career?
They're all challenging, Marco, in different ways. I guess I was working on a Michael Mann film, and we were in Indonesia, and it was all nights. Nights in itself is a challenge. Working nights and changing your internal clock to work at night and sleep during the day is difficult. Additionally, when you're dealing with a language barrier with the majority of the people that you're working with, and you have to have interpreters, is another challenge. And we also had a scene where we had 5,000 extras, and most of them either had instruments or torches. So there was an extensive amount of background props and special effects with these lit torches. And in the midst of that, there was a action sequence with gunfire and good guys versus bad guys. And the size and the scope of it was so large that it was very complicated, let alone the fact that the guys, a lot of the people working with you didn't speak English well, and there were difficulties with all of that. But it was a lot of fun as well. You find that some of the hardest jobs are also some of the funnest.
And actually, you know, we have a question here from Marcus. Marcus, if you want to tune in and ask Mike the question here.
I'll go ahead and I'll hop on. Just double checking again. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys see me? Everything good to go?
Yeah. Hi, Marcus. How are you doing?
Hi. Yeah. Two-parter question right here. A bit different on sort of the spectrum. But one is, do you work with concept artists, and what is sort of your relationship with them? Is that more of a production design thing? And then are they really freelance, or they usually come from a company? And then the second one is, how important is safety on set?
Okay, so with the concept artist aspect of it, on certain things that are like sci-fi or very design driven, a lot of the props will be designed by the art department. So the production designer and the art director and will get together with the director or the people who are in charge conceptually. For example, if it's like some sort of fantasy or sci-fi thing, and they will coordinate what the look of some of the costumes as well as what the props may or may not be. And when I'm hired, I'm already coming on to something where they're like, hey, this is the look we're going for. And ultimately you're somewhat of a facilitator of like, hey, I know where to go to get that made. I'll try to go to the place that either makes it the best or within the budget that we have. And you start making prototypes. And you may or may not have a lot of artistic influence in it, but that's something where like a conceptual artist or the art department will design things very specifically. And then I'm just in charge of having them made. As far as safety on set, there's, obviously, I don't know if you're referencing the recent news articles or what, but it is first and foremost one of our main concerns. And I feel like, and my job, and I've said this when I'm kind of complaining about what I feel someone who with a lot of experience in my position should make as their wages. I'm the only person who can poison your actor. I'm in charge of the food. Like if I don't give you food, if it's spoiled, if it wasn't kept well, your star is sick. He's gonna be sick. So I think there's a value in hiring somebody who is gonna make sure that the food is safe, let alone firearms. You know, we're dealing with baseball bats, knives, brass knuckles, you know, all kinds of devices and stuff. And often they could be, they could hurt someone. They could, you know, be dangerous if they're used in the same way. A baseball bat is dangerous if it's used incorrectly. You know, you know, that's why we do rubber bats. You know, and we coordinate with stunts. But for us, it's one of those things where no one really thinks about how important you are until something goes wrong. And when our department clearly is responsible for more things than people realize until something goes wrong. And, you know, knock on wood, no, I'm not aware of anyone getting seriously poisoned on a set yet by prop food, but, you know, that could be a thing. If you have someone who's inexperienced or not knowing what they're doing, feeding your actors, they can get sick. Or if you're working with weapons and you're not doing it, and you're not a professional and you haven't had the experience yet, someone can get hurt. Yeah. If that covers what you were asking.
Yeah, totally. Very insightful. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Mike, last question for you. This is from Kaya. So what happens to the props when we're done with the show? Where do they all go?
Well, there's an asset list usually at the end of every show, and depending on how proprietary that project was, is, you know, for like Marvel and certain things, they're very strict on where things are and what's accounted for. Other shows, it's based on the value of the item, and storage becomes an issue. There's a lot of places who want every single thing accounted for, and there's other places that just want certain things of certain value accounted for because they don't want to pay the high price of storing everything. Ultimately, you have some L&D, loss and damage, throughout a season, especially with a lot of action. So sometimes some of your vendors will take items in exchange, and you can work and make a deal and say, hey, look, we've purchased these items over the season, and we know that these things went missing or were broken, and we would like to see, be interested in doing an exchange so that we can not have to incur additional costs. And so you can sometimes make arrangements to compensate your vendors for L&D with certain things that you bought. But most everything is assetted, inventoried, photographed, boxed, and stored usually.
Awesome. Well, anyways, Mike, wanted to thank you very much for participating.
My pleasure.
And I'll see you tomorrow. And then
Okay.
for everyone who's been tuning in, if you needed to take a bathroom break, I was assuming a lot of people kind of pass back and forth. I'll just wrap things up here real quickly. This is an image I just wanted to share with everyone. I kind of liked it. Just kind of showed, this is a translite, and it shows literally behind the scenes. It's just equipment and crew waiting. The actual set is on the whole other side of it, but it's an interesting image when viewed from behind the scenes, which is hopefully today is given everyone stuff. So these are just some thoughts I had for you you should do. You can screenshot this, whatever, but literally, I've been trying to ask people like, hey, what is the career path that you took? You know, you've heard from multiple people where they are now as department heads. They didn't start off in those departments. I was using myself earlier. I didn't really touch upon like my whole entry route, but basically, and Vidal, who's our key grip, mentioned how he and I actually met years ago, almost 30 years ago. We were working on the same kind of low budget, non-union film together. He was the best boy grip at the time on that one. And I think I was like the second AD. But I had started off at this a non-union film house called Roger Corman. And I actually started off when I was there as a production assistant for like one show. And then I actually got into being, working as a grip and an electrician. And I did that for a couple of shows. And I knew I wanted to get into being an assistant director. And part of it was just because while I was working in these other jobs, I found myself questioning like, hey, why are we doing it this way? Why is it organized this way? This doesn't seem like we should have done this. We should have started off with this wider shot first. Or we should have started outside first and then ended our day inside. Or we should have shot looking towards the windows first, because knowing that we have shorter daylight hours, and then we can turn around in the room and not worry about seeing outside when it's dark. And I realized then it was like, well, the assistant directors really control the most amount of that stuff. Plus I wanted to become a director. So I thought, well, you know, I'll become an assistant director and I'll work my way up and get into directing. Well, here I am as a line producer in UPM, which is like, you know, kind of very on a horizontally very far away from being a director. But whatever, the thing is like, what you're doing right now, and it may not even be filmmaking in general, but you got to just look at it as either like the sport that you're going to play or the school club. It's just what appeals to you most at the time. You can change, but what appeals to you most? Because whatever you end up doing, you want to make sure that you enjoy it. Fame, money, it's all secondary. That true happiness in life is love. It's loving what you do. It's having people around you that you love. You want to focus on what really appeals to you. The next step, you go after it with 110% intensity. You heard multiple times from some of these department heads. I didn't prompt them to say any of this. And you heard them say, don't take no for an answer, which is literally like rule number one in whatever you're going to do in life, whatever job you're going to pursue. Don't take no for an answer. If you encounter an obstacle, you know, if they say, no, we're not hiring at this time. Okay, great. Do you know someone who is? You know, ask them for like, always be looking for like lateral ways to get around these problems. So ask people for help. You'd be amazed, even in this industry, how many people are willing to like help you out. Contacting the HR departments, human resources for the studios. You can go on, it's amazing today. I sound like an old guy. You can go online and you can like look up like ABC network or abcstudios.org or .com and go on, and there's a link for HR, for human resources, and you can see all the job postings on there. Just start going after this stuff. It's there. I mentioned earlier Facebook groups. I have 3 kids. 2 of them are actually through college now. One of them is they want to be in this business. I've told them they have to do it on their own. And she has had great success with going on the Facebook groups. And there's like Women in Film. And her boyfriend actually got a PA job by going onto the Women in Film Facebook group. And there's job postings there. And there's lots of different groups. There, you'd be amazed at, especially like student films. They're looking for people to work on these things. You heard a lot of people here talk today about within the unions, basically what they call like permit hire. So contacting the unions as well. So IATSE, IATSE, so International Alliance Theater Stage Employees. But all the, you can type in the local numbers. So all these different departments have different local numbers, like grip is 80, electric is 728. Don't worry about remembering any of these numbers. You can literally Google is this most amazing thing. And you can do a Google search for what are the Hollywood unions? And it will give you a listing of every single like position and what the union classification is and how to contact them. So you reach out to the unions. Film school versus learning on the job. And I was actually amazed. I didn't think there was that many. I thought there was be a lot more people who just did on the job training. And as I learned today, as you guys did, a fair bit of our crew, they also went to film school. So it is, I've always been honest with people, and I was with it with my kids, it's a toss up. Whether you go to film school or not, you can, and if you learn from a lot of these positions, you can enter these positions through multiple routes, through multiple entries, which is a great and beautiful thing. So it can also be a hard thing because that makes it kind of hard. It's not this clear one path where, you know, there's nice signposts for you that, okay, go to this website, sign up, you'll get hired, go here, go here. It's not that clear, but the beautiful thing is there's multiple angles that come at it. The union versus non-union, everyone here you were talking to today is union. We all started off non-union, as you heard from them. I'm a big fan of, you know, as you begin, those non-union positions are the easiest ones to find, that reality show filmmaking. But also, like you heard from Zhao, and I think also from Julia, you know, they didn't even start in this industry. They started in theater, and then they got into this. So there's lots of different avenues to get in. Whatever you do, production assistant, it is the key entry level. And I would say if you get a PA job or get wind of one and get able to get on as a PA, get it. You may decide how much you hate it, whatever, that's fine. But the more that you get in as a PA, you'll start meeting a lot of other people along the way. And that's something that Bill, who's the second speaker, a writer, spoke about, which was, it's an industry of contacts. The only way you're going to make those contacts is get in, start meeting people, start networking with these people, because as they rise up the ladder, you'll rise up with them. IMDb.com. It's a great tool. If you ever get an interview with someone, I always highly suggest look them up on IMDb. Why? You want to see what they've worked on before. So when you go in an interview with people, when you get to this thing, you can not only just talk about yourself, but you can actually talk about them. And I'm not saying turn the tables on being interviewed, but you'd be amazed. And I conduct a lot of interviews with people, and I find like it brings the interview process to a whole new level when the person showing up that I'm supposed to be interviewing is actually kind of asking me questions. And asking not just about the job and the position, but asking me, hey, so how did you get here? Well, you know, how did you get into the business and stuff? It shows that there's a person who's engaged. There's a person that is going to be a little bit more than the kind of the ordinary employee. And the last thing I said, don't take no for the answer. Last thing I want to leave everyone with are pros and cons, because they're not separate columns. So you're not going to have the pros on this side and the cons on this side, but I always make sure people are aware. Long hours, something you heard here. So typically on this show, like we won't work more than 12 hours, but that's 12 hours of the filming process. Long before when our call time, or when we're, if it's a factory, punching the time clock, so to speak, a lot of people start earlier, start at half hour earlier to that start time. So typically a start time for us is going to be 7 a.m. But depending on your job and position, you might be here as early as 5 a.m. for a 7 a.m. start. And if you work 12 hours, let's say there's just a half hour lunch, that means at 7:30 p.m. you're done. But now you gotta pack up all the equipment. Remember that assembly line I talked about earlier, it goes someplace new every single day. So you gotta pack up this whole operation, get it back onto the trucks and get ready. So by the time you get home and you look at your watch, you don't have very much time to sleep before you gotta get back up again and at it. That can be a good thing, that can be a bad thing. It's because you're paid by the hour, a lot of people, or you're paid by the week or by the day. So longer hours would be a bigger paycheck. The constantly shifting report time for work. So today, the call time was 7 a.m. Come Friday, we might have night filming. There might be a 5 p.m. call time. So you might film all the way till the sun comes up the following day. This can play havoc on your system. Mike, our prop master, talked about that a little bit, of how like it's the challenge when you're on the set. Extreme work environments. Thursday here in Los Angeles, there's rain in the forecast. Well, we've done what we can in terms of we're going to be on location for half the day and then we're going to be on our stages. We kind of got a little bit of a rain cover in one situation, but everyone who's outside of this building is going to get soaking wet. So you got to be prepared. You got to have really good rain gear, really good boots. We're entering the winter time. now it doesn't get cold here in Los Angeles per se, but if you're outside all night long and it's in the high 40s, it gets very cold when you're outside in 40-degree weather all night long. Not to mention if you're in New York, in Chicago, or up in Canada, and some other places where it's going to get down to the 20s, going down into the teens. Years ago, I worked on this one film where we shot in the middle of the Brooklyn Bridge in the middle of wintertime, and we were there for 3 nights straight. And I kept looking over in the Brooklyn, I was the first AD on the film, and I kept looking over in the Brooklyn side of New York, and there was a clock and a thermometer there. And when I saw it get below 0, and that's before wind chills factored in, I realized like, wow, okay, we got to hurry up here because it is getting cold. Extreme work environments. And not to mention here in Los Angeles, we could have days where it's over 100 degrees and we're outside and we're filming in a parking lot and there's no shade. So you're going to be in extreme environments. The length of a job, it's a pro and a con. So a lot of the engagements, you can be for 3 months, for 6 months, and then that engagement is over, or that show or that film. Well, if you don't like a lot of the people, you don't like the job, well, that's a good thing because you'll be quickly on to the next thing. It's also a bad thing because as soon as you're on something, you got to start looking for your next job because that current job is not going to end. It's going to end very soon. And lastly, competition for jobs. It can be very tight. It can be very tough. But now is a good time to be joining in the business because you've been hearing from a lot of the department heads that there's high demand right now. So that's pretty much it. At this time, are there any other questions?
So Marcus and I actually kind of came up with one because since a lot of our members that are here today are either still in high school or beginning of college, what could they get into or work on currently if, obviously not able to get into a professional environment in LA? What could they be working on or doing now that could possibly help them later on down the line?
I'm going to give an unorthodox answer to that only because, like, for instance, for me, I knew I wanted to get into this business, but what I was doing during my summers, I think there was one summer when I was like a junior in college. And now I went to college, but I was an English major in college. I didn't go for film. In fact, my college was so tiny, we didn't even have film studies or anything like that. And this was 30 plus years ago, right? Many years. So in fact, for my thesis, I created, as an English major, I created something that involved English literature and film at the same time. The things during the summer, though, that I was doing was like ordinary, everyday things that most people do. I worked in a movie theater as an usher. I worked at a summer camp as a camp counselor, which oddly enough actually prepared me greatly for being an assistant director. And it sounds weird, but the ability to speak in front of a group of people where you can tell there's people who are used to speaking to a large group of people at once. And then you can tell people who don't do it quite often. But I think in this business, anything you do right now in high school or in college will help. If you're not in the Los Angeles area, wherever you're at, there's going to be a local news station, or within your high school or college, there's like theater production as well. I mean, so for instance, getting into lighting through theater, basically just learning the basics of it. There, you'll be mostly dealing with tungsten lighting. Although now I can imagine even in high school theater departments, they might even have some of the LED technology. You might even have like a simple lighting board or the ability to control the lighting now through apps versus, I mean, back in our day, we didn't have much control over it. So, through your high school, through your college, do that type of stuff, and or look to get to a production hub. I think Bill mentioned it before, where if he had done it over again, he would have gone to a school like in Los Angeles to help develop the networks and stuff like that. So if you find, like, if you're in college, tougher if you're in high school, you're like, more than likely your parents are going to let you suddenly like, hey, see you, mom and dad, I'm off to LA for the summer, nice knowing you. But definitely when you're in college, you know, looking for an internship during the summer months. Those could be some of the routes.
Marcus, did you have something?
I think you hit the nail straight on the head. Just what they can do right now, just any experience that they can get. I think that was really, really insightful. No, nothing comes to mind right now.
But there's a few more people. I'll just spend a minute here just because I prepared some of these things. Just to show everyone, this is an example of an airplane mock-up that we need to do for a cargo plane. This is in the super rough stage before art department had even touched it. Here's like an old Warner Brothers sign we found just walking along the Warner Brothers ranch backlot. Here's an example of, this is a facade here on the Warner Brothers backlot. If you can see the top left picture on the right, that's what it looks like behind it. So you can see, like, this is what I would call a permanent set. And behind it's basically engineered with telephone poles and a lot of like cross bracing basically to support the exterior facade. The lower left photo is an example of what Vidal talked about earlier, or pod car for how we do this, the scenes for when people are driving in the vehicle. Here's just an example of a night exterior where a lot of what you don't see is just like all the crew and all the equipment that's behind. Here's like, you know, like kind of the monitor hubs, and you can briefly see like the cameras. This is during an actual like setup basically, so the actors aren't on set yet. I think you'd seen this slide earlier, recreating like an explosion from a house. There's a large light here. It's what we call an HMI light. It produces light quality that's equivalent to daylight. This large device over here, it's a silk supported off of a condor or crane. That's to shade the area, controls the light. Here's another alternative way to do a car scene, which is you pull it with a traditional camera car. So this is what we call a camera car and an insert car. And it's connected to what we call a tow dolly. So the vehicle is driven up onto this dolly. It elevates it slightly off the ground, but it allows you to film the scene with the actors without them having to worry about driving. There's some more behind the scene photographs, just give you a sense of what it looks like when you step back from the operation. This is I don't know, just a top-down view of one of our sets. You can see some of the lighting that comes in, air that comes in, especially now with COVID, we have air that comes in, we have air that comes out. This is from a different production. This isn't the Rookie. This is a much larger scale. We have like 3 different shading devices going on here. It's a pretty big operation. Here's like a 50-foot techno crane that's actually been elevated on truss in a massive kind of arena. This was another different show where we recreated, our guys had to rescue some people trapped in a helicopter. This is on a sound stage. We elevated it slightly off the ground, brought an actual helicopter hull, suspended it actually up here from all this infrastructure that's overhead. They built the set. In the back, the city twilights, that's what we call like a backing. Here you can, this fan is a large fan we call a Ritter fan to simulate, you know, this was in stories supposed to be like 20 stories off the ground. So to simulate the wind that's in effect. Here's another from a different show, larger production. We were filming, this is on the Paramount backlot. It's actually, normal times, it's part of their parking lot. When you drive down into it, it's like a 3.5 foot or 4 foot like slope you go down into, and you actually can fill it with water. We did this for an episode on a different television show that creates, I forget what we were doing, but again, we needed the ability to control the light or here shade our actors. So we put them on these condors. These are silks, we call them, and we can control the lighting all day long by doing that. another different show. We had to have show someone like get onto an airplane wheel as it folds up into the underwing. This is beginning stages of the build. This is an actual like wheel off of the like 747. So we got it from a airplane salvage yard out in the desert. Our effects department got the pneumatics to work again on it by hydraulics. So we actually were able to operate it and suspend it using this rigging. These other photographs here, this is one of the movie ranches here in Los Angeles. So you can see like kind of like what a behind the scene backlot. This one gets used a lot for playing like if you've got a desert film or even like African film, or I think we even used it to be, say like we were in like Baja, Mexico on one show. And this might be the last one. This is just to give you a sense for, my screen isn't operating well, but again, operating here on the water. This is down in San Pedro. There's a dock where we operate off of, and here we brought the boat in closer, but the ability to push the boat out, and we can sell that make it feel like we're out in open water, and yet the crew, all they had to do to get there was walk down a gangplank. So some of the movie magic, but some of the logistics that we had to encounter. There's a few more. Here's on a soundstage. We were supposed to be in the Antarctic. So we built, this is like a 4-foot high little wall. This is a fake kind of in the background, just to give you the semblance of mountains in the distance. And we're supposed to be on a frozen lake. So that's the stage floor that they painted and gave it a wax look to. Once the fans got going, they were blowing snow. It looked like you were literally out there in Antarctica. Just some behind the scenes photos. Sean earlier talked about electricity. That's a major thing we have to do. So this top left photograph shows like just part of all the work it takes place is to bring power to the set. This is a top-down view of just like a smaller set that was built. This one had complete with ceilings and everything, and some of the lighting that's outside. Filmmaking uses a lot of unique things, helicopters, things like that. I think that's it. This is our last, this was photographed from last season. We basically took over a bridge. In order to do that, we all had to work on a Saturday, which is something we don't like to do, but it was the only time we could get the full closure of the bridge. So that's pretty much it. That's what I got for you guys. Hopefully this has shed some light. Don't forget Google, best thing ever. You want to know what a first AD does? Google, what does a first AD do? And there'll be video clips on there. There'll be a lot of stuff that'll take you behind the scenes.
Awesome, Marco. Thank you so much for you know, moderating this, putting it all together, bringing everyone to speak to the members and the students. I know it's even for Marcus and I, we're in awe of being able to listen to you guys also. But I really appreciate the, you know, this great opportunity to be able to give them insight from industry professionals. So it's really valuable. Thank you.
That sounds good. All right, everyone.
All right.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Marco.
much.
Thank you,
soon.
everyone.